Welcome back to another OhmLab tutorial. Today, we're going to be talking about one of those topics that's always a bit controversial at first, but once I get through explaining it, it's actually a very well-received and universally agreed upon idea. Okay, so I'll get the idea out first, and then I'm going to have to explain it for just a few seconds before it might make complete sense where we're going here today. Okay, my idea is that there are no bad samples left in the world. Okay, now, before y'all go crazy and start writing in the comments area with your objections to that statement, hear me out. I do agree that there are some absolutely atrocious and terrible sounds out there that I would never use in my own productions. But there's a caveat to that statement. I would never use those terrible, awful, and atrocious sounds in my own projects until I transform them into something useful, usable, and relevant to what I'm doing. Okay, it is entirely possible to take something terrible and make it into a gorgeous sound. It's absolutely possible. And I think that we live in an age now where we all have access to tools. Many of them are free too. We have access to these tools that make an idea like a sample not being usable almost laughable. That's how powerful some of these things are. Now, before you start to shut down and think, oh yeah, but I don't know anything about this. I don't want to add another layer of complexity to my process and blah, blah, blah. Like all of these are perfectly reasonable objections. They really are. But the fact of the matter is that not everything is that convoluted and involved. Many things have like a zero learning curve to them. Okay, they're very, very simple, like one task tool plugins that you can use for stuff like this. What we're going to do today is kind of go through this scenario that we've probably all found ourselves in. That scenario is being disappointed with sounds in a sound pack that you've just bought. Okay, let's use the example of a drum pack because most people have picked up a pack of sounds for drums of some form or another. And let's say you've got 100 samples in there and you're so excited, you download this thing, you open it up, you start flipping through the sounds and you kind of finish with a So you listen through them again and you realize, wow, there are, a good 5, 6, maybe even 10 sounds in this pack that I think are just absolutely amazing. But there are easily a dozen, maybe even a couple dozen that I think are just absolutely terrible. I can't even imagine. I can't believe that the same people made these, and then the rest are just kind of meh. You listen to them and you're like, I might be able to use that if I layer in a couple other sounds and do some fancy compression and EQ work. And all of a sudden there's a lot of complexity in this. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things at play here, and they both kind of stem from our expectations. Okay, now we've probably all heard this in life. Expectations lead to disappointment. Okay, but it's true. If you don't have an expectation of something, then it's pretty hard to be disappointed, regardless of the outcome. That's fair enough. Okay. And the same can be said with these sounds, okay? We expect a really awesome sound design company to deliver really awesome sounds all of the time. And you know what? Maybe in their opinion they do, and you share a different opinion, or you have a different opinion. And most people would probably agree with you because nobody is going to be able to agree that all the samples are great because you're all producing different music. You have different tastes. So rather than roll around in those muddied waters for much longer, what we're going to do is just grab one of those meh sounds, one of those, wow, I don't think I'd use that sounds in your project. And again, a lot of the things about a sound that I don't like may seem very arbitrary and unimportant to you, and vice versa. Okay, so what we did was we selected just a quick little snare sample. I'll play it through a couple of times for you. All right, I really don't like this sound too much. It's running right up to 0 dB. There's very little life. There's very little spark. I mean, it's a pretty strong snare hit, and it should have some impact, some guts, and some character that just isn't really there. There's plenty of texture in there, but it's just not what I would want for one of my own sounds. Okay, so I begin to discount a sound like this in my mind as soon as I come across it in a pack that has better sounds. And I think that's perfectly human to do, and there's no problem with it. But what if we said, well, let's forget the expectation of having all of these drum sounds be used as drums in our projects, and how else could we actually use a sound like this? And we could transform it in any number of ways. This is what we did this time. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what just happened? We were talking about a snare drum, and now he's playing this weird like horn instrument, and that's the snare. That is the same thing that this was. It was this, and now it's this. And it only took a matter of seconds to do. I would say less than 1 minute entirely, and we transformed that snare that much. Okay. Now, let's just go ahead and do this again right before your very eyes. So you can see it all being done yourself. We'll just move this MIDI down from the track above so we don't have to play our instrument for you. So we are loading up an instrument or a sampler called Contact. It's from Native Instruments. You can use just about any kind of sampler for this type of thing. If it has a granular mode in it, then you can accomplish largely the same type of thing. But I really recommend going and grab Contact. It's a free download. You can grab the Contact player. It's not going to have all the fancy things that I have loaded up in my Contact, but it's going to have some great sounds. But again, this is a sampler. You put your own sounds into a sampler. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this snare sound and we're going to drop it right inside of Contact here. And immediately you see these keys down here, they turn light blue. They were white before, so they turn light blue, and that just means that we've now sampled our sound across all of these keys. And if I have... Okay, so we can play through this, and you can hear that the pitch and the playback speed are both affected when they're mapped out across these keys like this. Now, here's our first opportunity for getting a different type of use out of this sound that we would have written off before. Okay, let's go up a couple of octaves and see what it sounds like. Okay, so right there, you've got some pretty decent taps. You could work with that. You can sample those out, bounce them out in small samples, and use them as layers for other drums in that same kit, and it would probably fit great. Let's go down a few octaves and see what happens. Okay, obviously, so this is a type of sound that's fairly flexible, even though it's kind of a gutless wonder on in its original state. It could absolutely be laying the groundwork for some pretty heavy hitting impacts. But that's not what we're actually wanting to do with this sound. What we'd like to do is just, if you click on this little wrench up here, you can customize the sound by playing with the back end of this. You'll see first here on the source panel that it's playing direct from disk. That's what DFD stands for, in case you're wondering. Saves on RAM, streaming disks or sounds directly from your disk. So if you have a really quick hard drive, like we do, then you don't have to load the stuff in your RAM. It's very nice. All right, but we don't want direct from disk. Okay, we're going to use the first granular mode called Tone Machine, and we've talked about this before in another lesson here. And what the first thing that you'll notice that it does is that it affects the pitch of the sound without affecting the playback speed. So the really high notes being played are the same length as the really low notes. Okay, so through the magic of granular processing, we can do that. But what else can we do? What else should we do with a sound like this? Just right out the gates, you can see that there's a tone knob, or a tune knob, a smoothing knob, speed, and formant. Okay, these are your main, these three actually are your main parameters to play with when you're in tone machine mode. So the formant is going to affect some peaks in an EQ. Smoothing does just what it says it does, and speed does just what it says it does. And this is the speed of the playback. Okay, so if we play this, speed it up, slow it down. Okay, so while this is slowed down, this is an envelope that's set up to control the volume. Okay, that's here. And we'll just turn up our attack a bit. All of a sudden we have a somewhat playable instrument here. Okay, so it's nothing to write home about, but it's a totally different sound than the snare drum that we had initially. Maybe what we'll do is we'll add just a little bit of playability, realism to this. We'll put another envelope on here, and this one, instead of modulating the volume, is going to modulate the cutoff parameter of this filter that we just put on. So maybe we'll just do something like this. Okay, so you can see that the attack has been slowed down, so you can actually see the movement of this filter opening up. Should really turn this up. For some reason it's quite quiet. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right, so so we've got a little bit of action on there, and then you know, maybe we want to add an effect, maybe, or better yet, let's do this. Let's add another modulator, just a simple sine wave based LFO, and we'll pan this. Okay, now this is what we did in the example that you heard earlier. Fade it in just a little bit, so it's a little bit more natural. All right, and you know, we really don't have to put any other kind of effects in here or anything. Okay, so it's starting to sound a little bit better. On the example that we played you earlier, we actually routed this out to a little bit of reverb, so we can do that quite quickly here. And now this is the same. So if we play back our sound now, it's actually not too bad. And, you know, let's not forget that it started sounding like this. And now it sounds like this. Okay. It's just one example of how quickly you can transform a sound. And the biggest hurdle to get over is mindset. It's about changing your mindset and truly believing, buying into the idea that there are no more bad samples. That paradigm just no longer exists. Okay, and it's up to us to find new and creative ways to go about using these sounds now. And there are infinite number of ways to do this. Let's, you know what? We'll just run through one more here. That see, this is a great thing about having unscripted lessons like this, is we can just jump into something like this. Let's turn on our warp mode or our flex mode, and we'll just stretch this thing out a bit and see what it sounds like as a 4-bar sample instead of a quarter-bar sample. Okay, so see, instantly we've got an impact there. Let's just really quickly, we're going to put on an EQ. We're going to put on a compressor. And we're going to send this to a new bus. And on that bus, we're going to put on a reverb, which is going to take it from mono to stereo. And we're going to set this up together in just less than 1 minute. So we'll put this on. We'll take this down to get us our headroom back. There's always frequencies up here. Okay, and we'll bring this down for a little bit of low-end impact that you can only really feel, not hear. Oh yeah, there you go. That was nice. Now, we're probably going to take out around 100, maybe just a bit, and maybe also around 250 or so, just a bit. And then we'll come over here in between them and we'll boost this up. Okay, these are kind of muddiness areas that we got to be concerned with. Might want to take around 500 out too, just because there's usually a lot of activity in most music around those points. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we're just going to turn off our auto features. Let's bring this down to a vintage optical circuit type. We'll make sure that our attack is up high so we catch the transient. Our release, we don't actually want to hear our compressor release, so we'll keep it kind of high. Bring this down a bit. Let's add some soft distortion out. And listen to this. Add this 6 back that we're losing. That was kind of cool. Okay, so now our space designer, let's go into large spaces, and let's go for a hall. And let's just do something really big. Let's do this Abbey here. Okay, that's pretty big. Let's solo that. All right. Let's make sure that we're capturing as much initial movement as we can from the filter. Okay, we can bring this down pretty quickly. Okay, and we'll take out a lot of that low end so we don't interfere with our own sub. Okay, and we'll add a little bit of pre-delay here so it seems real. And we will dial that down a bit, and we'll play this back together. See what it sounds like. All right, so there you go. In about a minute or so, we transformed this snare that we would never use in one of our projects into this impact. And in about a minute or so, we transformed that same exact sample into this. Oops. Oops. Oh, goodness, I'm losing control here. All right, so let's see what this one sounds like. All right, so we made a playable instrument. We made an impact, both out of a sound that we thought was fairly useless at first. There is no such thing as bad samples anymore. That's how I feel about it. I hope that I've helped you kind of shift your mindset a little bit on this topic, and you can see that even using a tool as robust and intimidating as Contact can actually be incredibly quick and easy to do. There are user-friendly features inside of every tool out there. I guarantee it. It's just a matter of finding them and figuring out what kind of tolerance level you have for these types of tasks. Okay, it's just that simple. Instead of only having a small handful of sounds out of every 100 that you feel like you can use all 100 or use 50% more at least, and you're getting so much more value out of your sounds. We all have enough sounds on our hard drives right now to last the rest of our lives, and we could make new and unique and innovative sounds and music every day for the rest of our life with those sounds. We just have to be willing to put forth the effort to kind of disclose some of the hidden potential of each one of them. All right, so we hope that you found this useful and helpful and relevant to what you're doing. You should, because everyone's using sounds out there. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, leave a comment below. That's how we figure out what we're going to do next for our tutorial. So if you have a request, put it out there. If you don't agree with something we said, let us know. If you liked it, let us know that too. Thanks for stopping by, folks. We'll see you again soon. Cheers.